For the practice problem in this unit, we're going to continue to build on the use of session variables and the session state to move data between two web pages. So we've created a simple app with two web pages. The first collects some information for ordering kitchen island countertops. So we ask for the length and the width of the countertop. We ask for the material, and then we have a button to get the price. So these are just text boxes. So txt length and txt width are those two. And you have to use those in the assignment to pass the information to the session. Now this is a radial control, RB material. And so it has a collection of things. So I can go down here to the collection, and I've typed in the four types of countertops here. One thing to note is that for each countertop type in a radio button collection here, a list collection, it can have a text which is displayed. It can also have a value by default, and so each one of these has a different value, which is the cost per square feet of this countertop. And we'll be sending both the text and the value parameters on to the next page. So let's look at what we do when we click, well, let's just run this first. So when we run this, we can enter length. Maybe we'll have a 4.5 by 3 foot countertop. And it'll be a laminate countertop, and we'll get a price estimate. So when we hit get price estimate, we'll move from page 1 to page 2. So here's we've loaded up page 2. We've also passed some of the information over. We've passed the type of the countertop and the price per square foot of the countertop. So let's look at how this is done. So if we look at the page 1, we have the length and width and then this radio button. The radio button is called, let's click on it, so we, there. The radio button group is called Radio RB Material, RBL, Radio Button List Material. And then let's look at the code behind the button. So there's no code in the page load event, everything's done in the button click event. And what I want to do is grab the information stored on the page here. So example what they've selected here on the radio button list from the materials, and store that in the session variables. So I can get at that, I can go radio button list material, RBL material, that's what I named the radio button list. And I can get the selected item. I have to convert that to a string here. I'm just going to get select item to string. Whenever you're grabbing the select item, you need to just convert it to string to make any use of it. So this will get the word quartz or a laminate or whatever. And I'm going to store that in a session variable, so I say session, and then I provide a key. I can make whatever key I want. I'm just going to use the word material to store the material in. I'm also going to grab the cost of the material, which is stored in the value, so I can again grab the radio button list material. And this time I'm going to go dot selected value. So this will get the value. So remember with our radio buttons in that collection, let's select this. Okay. So if I look under items here for the collection, every object has both a text, that's the to string value which will be grabbed, and then a value, and this is what we'll grab at the value. So when I say selected value, that'll be the value of the selected item. And again, I'm going to store that in the session. I just say session and then provide a key to the dictionary to store that. So that'll store this in that spot in the session variable. Then I'm just going to open up page 2. I can do a server.transfer or a response.redirect. There are two ways of doing it. We're not going to go over much of the difference there. So I'm going to use response.redirect. One thing I like about that is it does pop up the name of the second page up on the URL to show that I'm at that page. So let's look at the code for the second page then. So in the second page, I just have one large text field, txt estimate. It's been set to a multi-line So the text mode is set to multi-line, so I can have multiple lines in this text field. Now, here I am going to use the page load event. When the page opens up, I'm going to grab some information. Again, I'm going to go to the session and grab the material. And again, this key has to match the key here. So whatever word I use here to store information in the session variable, I have to use that same key when I pull it out of the session variable. And it's not uncommon to define named constants in your code for those things. But I find when we're first learning, it's sometimes easier for students to understand when we just use the quoted names here. But in a lot of area, when you get more, when you learn this more, it's pretty common to have named constants for these things. Okay, and then also the material cost. Again, I'm going to use session and then material cost, because that's what I stored it under, is that key, material cost. Now I have to make sure I convert these. Anything you pull from the session is going to be a generic object until I cast it. So I have to cast this as a string, so I'm going to cast it to a string and store it in a string variable. This is a number, and so I'm going to cast that as a string and then convert that into a decimal here. So I'm going to go decimal.parse. So you might think that you could just do this. Let's comment out the way that actually works and try this way that doesn't work. Just take the session variable, grab material cost, and cast it right to a decimal, and use that. But unfortunately that doesn't work. And one thing to make sure when you're testing these out, make sure you run it with the first page. I'm going to go back to the first page and hit run. Select some values here. And an exception we rate, we have an invalid cast here from this object. It just doesn't know how to do that complicated of a conversion in a direct cast. That's why we have to, we can't do it this more simplified way. So what we have to do is this. We have to cast it to a string and then convert it from a string to a decimal or a number of some sort. So I'm going to use decimal.parse to convert this string into a number. So it takes a little bit of work to convert this to a number, but here we have a number that we can work with. Okay, and then I'm going to actually set, if you remember, I have this big text field here. It was called txt estimate. So I'm going to say txt estimate.text equals counter estimate. Now I'm going to go to a new line. There's a number of ways in constants for using new lines, but we prefer to use the environment.newline constant for this, because this will work in a number of different environments and situations. So we're just going to add on a new line here, and then we'll put on the next text use selected, and then we're going to grab the material, which is a string, which costs, and then add on the material cost here that we have, and then put in another new line. So now when we run, now here's, let me do some saving here. One thing again to watch is if you're on page 2 and you run, if you're going to jump right directly into page 2, you're going to get an error because session hasn't been set, and so we really should do some error checking on session and that it's been set. But again, we'll do a little more talk about error checking in the next lesson. So if I go right to page 2, I will get an error, and again I will we'll see that issue because I was in page 2. So make sure you switch to page 1 before you hit the run button. So now I can type in some values here. That's a mighty big countertop. And get an estimate. So you selected a granite countertop, which is 1250 square foot.